Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. I'm your host, Hunter Salazar, of course. I'm here with...
Rodrick Z. What's going on, everybody?
Excellent. Nice to have you back on the channel. And this is going to kind of be a dual thing. So this is going to be on your podcast as well. So what's the plug for your podcast, by the way?
So my podcast is called The Far Side of Midnight, and I am on 6 platforms right now. I'm going to be on 7 within like a month. I'm on Spotify. I'm chuckling for certain reasons. Some of you may know. I'm also on Apple Podcasts. I'm on Anchor. I'm on Breaker. So if you just type in The Far Side of Midnight, don't forget to put the at the beginning. I usually come up on Spotify. So, yeah.
Excellent. Nice to have you here, man.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
No problem, man. And so earlier we were talking about non-dualism versus binary occultism. Did you want to ask me what that is, or do you want me to kind of like...
I do want to ask you. So, we're kind of doing a little warm-up before, and we're talking about duality and occultism. So what is binary occultism? Is that what it was? Binary?
Yes, that is. Yes,
okay.
For sure. So it's kind of my own term. It's not something that other people use. So just to give a basic idea, binary occultism is basically like left-hand path, right-hand path. It is a spectrum. It is a singular line.
Okay.
Without any definition or dimension to it. And people on either the right-hand path or the left-hand path kind of judge each other based on where they are on the spectrum. And a lot of people like me, usually by their definition, we would be at the center. But I don't feel that's quite correct. Because occultism in general, even when you're working with demons, Belial, Moloch, Azazel, some of these you might say, hey, these are old gods. Sure, at some points, but how do they themselves identify, how they describe themselves? But the word demon is kind of a problem, because if you adopt the dictionary of your enemy, in this case the church, and even if you're trying to reclaim that title, even that definition or that name, you're still playing by the other side's rules. So somebody who is outside of this game between, demons and angels, somebody who's outside of that, I don't identify with demons or angels. If you're going to talk to me, you're asking me to play the game that you've been playing with your enemy, whichever side you're coming from. So if you're asking me to play that game, if you're asking me to enter that match, you're asking me to basically enter a 2-dimensional universe rather than a 3-dimensional one or a 4-dimensional one or a 5th-dimensional one. Because you're using the same terms that your enemy uses for you, and you're just trying to reclaim them. So a more correct term for me for demons would be asuras, more complicated in Hinduism. It's not good and evil. And there's plenty of people worship Kali Ma like me that think that a lot of devas, who are thought of as gods, are actually asuras. It's way more complicated. And devas and asuras also, they take up different teachings from the Upanishads. So it's way different than the duality of Christianity versus Satanism, Luciferianism, or, left-hand path versus right-hand path. That is an engagement that people try to draw me in on a regular basis. I don't want to be drawn in with those terms. But how many people that contact me when it comes to Satanists or when it comes to people who work with demons know the term asuras?
Probably not that many of them, because unless they've worked with some Eastern systems like you and I have. But it's really
surprisingly more specific than the word demon. So I'm stuck with the terminology that this little fight here in the one-dimensional plane has forced upon me. So what do I do?
Okay, so I have another question for you. All right, so you presented a really good issue, and I like that. But let's get into the nuts and bolts of this, really.
Excellent.
All right, so demon is not a really good term for you. So what would be I guess a better question would be, what would be the purpose of working with a demon anyway? I mean, I have my own ideas on it, but what, in your view of, magic and occult spirituality, what will be their the reason for that, or what would be the reason of working with something that has shadow like that carries that
Okay, so
chaos?
as a lot of left-hand path practitioners will tell you,
Mm-hmm.
demon comes over her daemon, or like personal spirit. It could be spirit. It could be personal
Mm-hmm.
guardian even. It depends on what you're talking about, because the word demon, a lot of left-hand paths will tell you, means this. It's your personal spirit, your personal guardian, or it means something that's of a spiritual nature, not necessarily something that's demonic or like evil. So it kind of depends on what you're asking. But so let's say that why would I work with Belial or like a demon king? Now a lot of people say Belial or Baal are not demon kings. It might be ancient gods. That might be valid, sure. But because of what they've been called upon for, they might change. Because let's say you elect a representative in like a public office, what you call upon them for is going to change their nature. So just look at the other followers of Belial or Baal, two different things, I know, and see what they've asked upon this being. What I think that you might want to get from them is possibly personal willpower in your life, maybe even attract wealth to your life, some money in this lifetime, and possibly bring about a sense of self-empowerment that goes beyond perhaps even the material realm, perhaps spiritual self-empowerment. These might be things that you would call upon these beings through. And Paimon is especially good for wealth and attracting money. Those are the things that you would get if you call upon these beings. And unlike the church or Christianity or whatever, I will say, just for me, that on the long term, focusing on these temporary goals might not work out for your spirit. Let's not even talk about soul. Let's just talk about spirit, the natural life force within you. If you expend a lot of the natural life force within you, you can call it prana. And calling out to these beings, working with these beings, what is truly within you. And if you expend that, then you're going to have much less that truly wells in the deepest parts of yourself. And a lot of people focus on what's on the outside. If we focus on what's on the inside more, then it's easier to weather what is going on beyond the surface of our skin, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Yeah, it totally does make sense, because I think it's easy to get lost in certain terms, and words mean a lot to us on, in occultist, spiritual practitioners, or whatever you want to call it. Again, here with problem with words. They mean a lot though, because a lot of people don't know what asuras are. A lot of people don't know what, like in tantric Buddhism, we have wrathful deities that you've worked with as well, that live in the throat area. Some people may be like, well, why would you want to work with those? And they're very, very beneficial if you know how to do them, and if you're trained in doing them, of course. But okay, so let's go ahead and kind of divide them really fast here. So just to bring some more clarity. So we have on one side, like the independent kind of practitioner from, left-hand path, right-hand path. And then the other side of the coin, we have the practitioner that is more interested in, can I say, higher pursuits, higher spiritual pursuits? Would that be correct?
Destroying the ego, not focusing on this life, and a belief in the Atman or the soul, and trying to progress that piece of oneself that is beyond the personality and the ego. That somebody who's not focused on what's in this world at all. Many people, I don't like using the word left-hand path, but on the left-hand path, we'll say, this is who you are now. What do you want? Achieve what you want. Don't worry about something that you do not have a concept of that is beyond this, or perhaps in your future, as a future life. Take care of yourself now. Take care of your wants and desires now. That will lead to happiness. But people who are focusing on enlightenment train themselves to basically get rid of all those desires and all those wants and all that body identification and that, even life identification. And then they want to transcend. It's hard to bring these two sections of practitioners together. I fall somewhere not necessary, just kind of like a nebulous way in between. But I I think that there should be a way for different ideas on one side and this side to come together, and it's not necessarily right hand versus left hand. I think it's more transcendent practitioners or believers versus people who are focused on their wants and desires now or their personal empowerment so that they have that power within their lives, within who they are right now. And, there's plenty of those people don't believe in reincarnation. So that might be all that there is to them in their mind. So that's completely fine. But I feel like I want to bridge the gap, and I'm not really sure exactly how.
Yeah, it seems like a pretty tough job though, because we have this dichotomy in the magic community. I like to call it the magic community. We have this dichotomy, and one side is very fiercely independent, very individual, focus on their desires, focus on their own power, focus on your own self, forget everything else. And then on the other side, it's like, well, I am important and I want to take care of myself and my means as well. But I also know that life is very perilous sometimes. It's very brief. A lot of times I want to focus on something higher. I want to take these energies or these powers or whatever you want to call it and focus on some kind of higher pursuits. So in order to bridge the gap, wouldn't it be a good idea? Do you think it would be a good idea for a person to both explore parts of both, to have one foot in one area and one foot in another one, and to kind of feel it out through experience? Or would you just say, like, just pick a side and kind of stay with it, and if you fail at that, go to the other? Like, what would you say would be the better
Well,
method?
I'll tell you what I'm doing, and the reason why I get contacted by vastly more left-hand pathers than right-hand pathers or Buddhists or Hindus. I get contacted by a lot of Hindus, but there's a lot of Hindus. Population-wise, percentage-wise, I get contacted by way more left-hand pathers and Satanists, which is, if anybody watches Game of Thrones out there, it's kind of like I'm Clegane and I end up with a band of fire worshippers. If you can interpret that, then that's kind of usually where I'm at. But yeah. So what I do is I don't like to judge something before I understand it. I don't. So I will analyze a book, and I will try to get rid of all of my bias. I will analyze another person. I'll try to get rid of all my bias. It's not even just true with magic or spirituality. I'm looking at that person's relationship to their path and how they understand it. And if they're achieving what they understand, and if they're lying to themselves about their achievements. If I can see somebody who is not lying to themselves about their achievements, understands their path, and has a clear vision very far in the future, then that person to me is worth listening to. That person to me is worth analyzing. Because what I try to do when I'm analyzing either a teaching or a person, I try to get rid. I just go complete observer mode, just complete observation, and I try to judge somebody based on their own path, not mine, not my own criteria, but theirs. And if they meet their own criteria fully, I'll probably listen to them. But the vast majority of people, even in the occult community, even the magic community, even the spiritual community, do not meet up to their criteria at all. Whether it be so-called right-hand path or left-hand path, or people going towards enlightenment. There's a lot of talk of, there's so many terms that are thrown around that people don't understand. Like me and you understand them, but like shadow work, for instance, I hear a lot of people talking about it, and then I watch them, what they say, what they post, or I'll even talk to them, and I'm like, it's just a key term for them. It's just like vocabulary. They don't really understand what it means. They don't understand what enlightenment means. They don't understand what karma means. They're using it because they've heard it. Their environment, even their social environment online, has conditioned what they will say. That doesn't mean that they engage with the environment that has inflicted itself upon them, or more importantly, engage with themselves. And honestly, it's like I worship the Divine Mother Kali Ma. I've been with her for, I don't know, 11 years, 10 years. I don't know, I'm 30. But I get a lot of people contacting me thinking they know about Kalima, and they've been working with her for about a year. They talk about how dark she is and like how vindictive or vengeful she is, and I'm like, what the hell you're talking about? Because once you work, so all these symbols that are Kalima, once you get to the heart of them, you're given a vision of a being that is completely composed of light. If you think that she actually has heads around her neck, or she actually has a trishula, or she actually has a head and she's holding up a bowl with blood pouring in it from the head. By the way, these are either demon heads or the different letters of the Sanskrit alphabet, depending on your interpretation. If you really think that she looks like that and that is your interpretation of her, then you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Period. She is a being of light, and if you see her, you will see her. And there's been people who have tried to curse me that have seen her and told me about it, and they were my friends at the time. Over time, I realized that there's a reason why that Divine Mother kept me away from them. But in conclusion, you either know what you're talking about or you don't. And also, you can take up the dogma of the church or the dogma of the left-hand path. There's plenty of dogmas out there, but these seem to be the two that are taking control of the cult community. I don't take any other dogma than myself. That's it. That's all. I don't know what I am. Don't know exactly who I am, but I know what I do. And I think that I know what I know. And that's it.
You live in a moment, my friend. That's great. You live in a moment, and you get your experiences. I appreciate that. So we're going to go ahead and continue a little bit with my end, I guess, on my show here. So I wanted to kind of dive into this a little bit because back to the right-hand, left-hand path dichotomy, like on this part of the subject, because these are two terms that are much less defined in Western occultism than they are in the East. And that right there in itself poses a problem, in my opinion, because people will look at the left-hand path, for instance. Let's just say that, right? First of all, in Western occultism, people that use the term right-hand path are left-hand pathers. People that work with more, like, if I could say, lighter energies, or some might say fluffy energies, I don't know, or whatever, they don't refer to themselves as right-hand path. They just call themselves for whatever they feel they are. If they practice a system of ceremonial magic, they're going to be a ceremonial magician. If they practice modern witchcraft, they're a modern witch, or they're just a witch, or whatever. Any of those subcategories in between. But speaking of the left-hand path, because that truly is one of the most, in my opinion, one of the most misunderstood, and it's the most controversial, as we know. But it's one of the most misunderstood because you know about this because you're a Hindu. In India, you have the right and left hand, Varmachara, Dakshinachara. I think I'm pronouncing them. Maybe I'm mispronouncing them.
It's less of a dichotomy, but I know what you're saying. I know
exactly. Yeah, but for the audience that may not have read the Vedas at all, or the Bhagavad Gita, or anything Hindu related, I'm sure there's plenty out there that haven't. In those terms, in the Sanskrit terms, and also in the Tamil alphabet, the Tamil, like South Indian terms, they're much less defined. What makes those paths what they are the acts of worship and the acts of devotion and any kind of ritual that they do in those, any type of puja or any types of devotional rituals that they have. That's what makes them. So if a person is a left-hand path Hindu, they may do a lot of rituals that involve being at a graveyard, being at the ash grounds and doing some work there, spending like days or if not weeks or even months there. Some more extreme cases, some of the sadhus may be there for like years, just like around dead bodies being burned all day. And that is I'm going to use a generic term here for a moment. That is their shadow work that they do, but they don't do it necessarily to bring up their shadows. They do it because that's their way of merging with divinity by going into the muck going to the death, getting to know the deepest, one of the most feared things on earth is death, and all civilizations. So they face death head on. That's their type of work, And Western occultism, the left-hand path work is much more modern. It's been something that hasn't really been around very long. I would say like after Crowley's era, getting into like the 1950s and 60s, getting into Anton LaVey, that's when it kind of started really for Westerners for the most part. Even though there have always been, not always, but for centuries there have been, like the Goetia has been around for centuries. The Arbitel has been around for a long time. These different grimoires, but a lot of that knowledge was kept. And if you're in the Abrahamic systems, you weren't really supposed to touch some of those other things,
And it is very strange. I don't mean to intersect too much.
Oh,
but,
no.
It is very strange that, so in a lot of Hindu texts, you'll see somebody's, it'll just be said, this person did this by magic, and it won't explain the magic, and it won't name the person. So this pops up every now and then. It's not that common. It's pretty rare. But then you see that, and you're like, wait a minute, where's the rest of the information? The information is shared, but it pops up in Hindu texts going back thousands of years. It's pretty remarkable. Like it'll just say like, I'm not sure if it's Srimad Bhagavatam or not, but this person killed this person with black magic, and then that'll be the whole description, and then there's nothing else. So yeah, it's there's been things happening for a while, but continue.
Oh yeah. I was just gonna say, I guess my point of kind of my long rambling on like the left-hand path in particular is because it's less defined in its true forms, right? It's much less defined, but here in the West, particularly in the United States, Canada, England, where we have where a lot of Western occultists do practice that, they give it a very, very opaque definition, which if you ask left-hand path is okay, like what does your work entail? They might say, like we were saying earlier, before, they might be like, well, I might invoke Belial, excuse me, I might invoke some form of the devil, some kind of
Beelzebub.
Some kind of deific mask of Lucifer, something like that. They may do things like that. But the reasoning being is because here's the dichotomy I'm going to bring up really fast. So in the left-hand path community, people will work with dark imagery, dark figures, dark shadows, oftentimes because they themselves experience powerlessness in their life. Many of them were abused, come from broken homes, have had severely broken relationships, were violated in their life. And then on the non-left-hand path, what they may say right-hand path or whatever, people who just do straight up spiritual work, or they may practice occultism that doesn't involve like working with dark energies and shadows. They in their life may not have had such deep pain like that. So there's not much of a need to gather more and more power and to lift oneself up and to become a god. Excuse me for saying that. So their motivations may be different. And I think that's where the dichotomy comes from. The dichotomy comes from the main part of that dichotomy comes from two things, in my opinion. It comes from one, the need, like why somebody would be on whatever occult path, whether it's a shadow path or non-shadow path. And then two, the dichotomy also comes with language, because we're using, we're us as English speakers, and even if they're speaking Spanish or Portuguese or any other language, they're going for sources that are overwhelmingly Abrahamic. Let's just get that out of the picture. And when you're looking at the Abrahamic sources, and this is not bashing them at all, because obviously if they didn't work, they still wouldn't be in circulation, in my opinion. It just they work for somebody, otherwise they wouldn't be there. But those.
Oh, can we pause real quick and then we'll go to another part? Let me just
yeah.
start off here. All right, so this is the first part, everybody. We'll be back for a second part.